Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers, Michael Kilpatrick here with another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. And today my guest is Maggie Cheney, who is a farmer at Rock Steady Farm. Maggie grew up growing and loving food. They have been involved with food and farming their entire life, both urban and rural. In 2006, they helped start an elementary food garden program in Oakland, California, and then went to University of California, Santa Cruz Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems. After farming a bit in the Hudson Valley and Staten Island, they moved to New York City in 2011, where they met many of the Rock Steady community partners in New York City while leading a diversity of food justice and youth leadership program. Let's see what else. They've worked on the Food Sovereignty Fund, which funds food access projects across New York State by sourcing from specifically BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus farmers, as well as supports on advisory boards for numerous food organizations in the region. In 2015, D, which is Maggie's business partner, co-founded Rock Steady Farm, which is a queer-owned and operated cooperative vegetable farm rooted in social justice, food access, and farmer training located in Millerton, New York. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
So talk to us a little bit about what drives you, what got you into food and growing food?
Well, I've been around farms my whole life. My dad's a farmer and still is in the Boston area. And I personally didn't know I was going to necessarily be a farmer when I was a kid, but I have been drawn back to it over and over and again over the years. And so I think no matter how I try to kind of like be involved with other related kind of worlds in terms of education and food justice work, I always get drawn back to like a larger scale agriculture. So I think, I love Millerton. I love this area. And I'm definitely super passionate about the work we do at Rock Steady. So yeah, excited to be going into my 20 years growing now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So Millerton, New York is a very unique part of New York. And I actually, before we started the podcast, I've been there. I spent a few months actually in that region. We actually lived there in an apartment there. Talk to us about the kind of unique climate and the environment of that area.
The Northeast is a pretty great place to grow food, honestly. I mean, I've grown food in California and there are huge challenges there, as many people know, around water access and now fires. And I think we're really lucky in that we have steady rain on and off. I mean, we do have, bouts of drought, but overall the climate's pretty great here, and it's a shorter season, but I talk to farmers in Maine, Canada, and it feels like a luxury to be able to farm from April to November. And we do have hoop houses at our farm. We are trying to build 2 more next spring, so that helps with kind of season extension that we want to do in providing a little bit more jobs opportunity for the farmers here at Rock Steady in the winter as well.
Gotcha. And so talk to me a little bit about when you started in 2015, how did you choose Millerton as an area?
Well, we had the opportunity, 2 of us who founded Rock Steady were managing a farm that was on the land when it was previously a different farm. And the farmer decided he was going to move and offered to kind of take over the business. And so the negotiation process started in 2015. And we ended up not taking over his business. We didn't want his brand and same outlets, but we had, farmed the land. It's incredible soil. It's a great location, just being 2 hours north of New York City, which is really important to us community wise, because a number of our farmers are from New York City, and the people that we want to feed in the LGBTQ community are, a lot of them are based there. So being accessible by a pretty straightforward, 22 goes straight into Manhattan area. Yes. So it's an easy ride relatively. But yeah, so that was a big draw. And we're also really lucky. There was a number of great projects starting up at the same time in the area too. So we felt like there was really great energy in terms of new, very justice-based projects, which are hard to come by in terms of like rural living, where you can find yourself sometimes pretty secluded in different areas. But we felt like there was a strong community here that was building, and we wanted to be a part of it.
Okay. So talk to us a little bit about, what does the farm entail? You said it's got great soil. How many acres is the farm?
Right now we lease about 13 acres, though we're growing on 9. So our production itself is all vegetables at this point. We used to grow flowers. We transitioned out of flowers 2 seasons ago. And we have, access to a huge amount of water on the land. It's a beautiful area with lots of mountains, and it's very rocky, which is where part of the reason our name comes from. Rocksteady is there's a lot of rocks, but other than that, it's a great spot.
Yes, gotcha. Now, why did you drop the flowers? Talk to us about that.
Well, we dropped it for a number of reasons. I think in the beginning, we were viewing kind of our model as, very high-end flowers that were going to help us kind of bring up our income, bring up the amount that we're able to pay our farmers, and like financial stability. And then we're hoping that we could kind of keep our vegetables in that like CSA range, not have to try to go into like high-end restaurants, edible flowers, that kind of thing, to try to get a higher income. And we ended up finding that the flowers were not as profitable as we thought. And the mere aspect of running 2 very different enterprises on the same land was really complicated, especially with something like flowers, which takes a ton of post-harvest handling and space, and also a whole nother sales outlet that and delivery route. It was a very complex enterprise. And so there was a moment when one manager was transitioning out, and we were just like, you know what, like, let's pause before we just try to hire another manager. And we decided to dive deep into the financials. And then when we started to think about it, it was much more in line with the direction that we were getting called to, which was around really focusing on food access, and also leaning more into farmer training for queer and trans farmers. So having the opportunity to kind of drop one enterprise enabled us to really pick up this other enterprise, which is our education and community work that we do. And that felt really right. That felt like something that, our community of farmers, our community of eaters all wanted us to shift towards. And I don't regret it a bit. I do a little bit. I mean, the flowers are gorgeous. I miss having the beauty around, but in terms of logistics and mission and alignment with where we want to go in the future, I'm so happy we made that call.
Mm-hmm. So now with the flowers, the difference is, obviously, let's say you harvest a zucchini, you basically put a zucchini in a bin and you sell it. But with flowers, especially if you're making mixed bouquets, you have to condition it, you have to make the bouquets, you have to store it in the cooler, and they are not something you can put in a crate. You usually have to put in a bucket. So there's just a lot more of a challenge to deal with them.
Yeah, yeah. And the number of flowers that we're growing was a lot, and each one requires very different post-harvest handling. It's not like all flowers get treated the same way. Some flowers you put into water, sometimes you don't. Some flowers you put in the cooler, some you don't. It's like just a very involved process. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said it's better for us just to let the people that do flowers, and we'll just do the veggies.
Yeah. Yeah. Which are a lot in and of itself,
Yes.
And so that's worked out. I feel like our production has really started to hum when we went that route, just not navigating two totally different crop plans also on the same land base. So tractor and, just cultivation work just has been really, really humming the last 2 seasons since we made that transition too.
All right. So walk us through a little bit of your scale of production. Like what's your equipment regiment and how are you set up?
So we are a very tractor-based farm. We have 4 tractors on site, and 2 of them are more primary tillage based. One is kind of like a backup primary tillage that we mostly use for mowing. And then we have one cultivating tractor that's only used for weeding and cultivation. And the scale that we're to get a sense of it, we're 9 acres, but we're super diverse. We have a 500-person CSA, and we also do large wholesale accounts for restaurant groups, specifically Dig in New York City. And so it's quite a lot of food that we're producing, and there's a lot of quick turnarounds with the land. So we'll plant something and then right away turn it into like, okay, a lettuce bed, and then we'll go into cover crop. And we're planting every week essentially for a lot of the season up until September. And what else to say? Yeah, I mean, we're doing what a lot of farmers are doing in terms of fighting the weeds in an organic farm system is quite the challenge. So we definitely utilize a lot of tractor weeding techniques, and then we follow up with by hand as needed. We have incredible team. We're a team of 9 that are like in the field. I'm kind of part-time. There's one other person who's part-time because we spend some of our time in the office. But in terms of just like, we've got a lot of hands, which is awesome. That I think, given how complex our admin is as a sliding scale farm doing social justice work, we have a lot of people involved, and we have 9 locations that we're dropping off our food. So it's, it takes a lot of people to run our operation, and we're still trying to figure out how to select certain tractor implements that are really going to reduce labor. So we're considering getting a transplanter and a few other things, but we'll see. We're kind of like this small scale, medium scale farm. So you're kind of like teetering on that edge of wanting larger machinery, but you don't really know if it's going to pay off in the long run, given your low margins. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And when you said part-time farmer, I was like, but what you meant is part-time in the field, part-time in the office. So
yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay. So you've got so you're doing like a regular rototiller for tillage with a chisel plow, or?
So our rotation usually goes, we chisel once in the beginning of the season to break up any of the compaction, or we're kind of plowing cover crop so that we're flipping that. And then we tend to go once with the disc, then the perfecta. And now we're trying to just use the perfecta for final bed prep because it tends to be a little less intense on the soil. And if we have very fine seeds we need to sow, we'll go to a rototiller, which because the beds do have a much finer tilth. But other than that, we're trying everything with the perfecta for final bed prep. And then we have a dibbler that we essentially it kind of rolls over our beds and makes the lines and the holes for all of our plants.
Yes. And now, is that a Dave Hamilton special?
No, it's one we made. Yeah, it kind of a make off of the previous farmer, Andy, who was here before.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So now you're farming that. Now you have the team. Talk to us a little bit about the systems and setup. When you're farming, do you have like very specific people do very specific roles, or does everyone kind of just move around as they're kind of doing different things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always try to ask that question too, as a manager of humans in a business like ours. So we're a cooperative farm. It's in our ethos to try to create a lot of different leadership positions on the farm and different management positions, which we feel like help lead to wanting to join the cooperative. So the way that we run our farm is quite, there's a lot of room for autonomy in different areas. So we've got a greenhouse manager who also helps manage kind of like the crop plan and transplanting in the field. They also oversee our hoop house tomatoes. We have a wash pack manager. We have a programs and education manager, which is a new position this year. We have like tractor, kind of like an irrigation point, which is also an evolving role, trying to get a little bit more people trained up on tractor work other than Dee and myself. So we've got another person who's learning a lot of those skills. And we also have a harvest manager, which is a lot of coordinating of what is going to go in the CSA shares each week, what are our numbers for wholesale. And I think that's it. Yeah. And then Dee and I are the general managers, so we kind of oversee the whole thing and help train and or appoint people for the whole team and kind of manage the flow of everything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, with that, how have you found the right people for the roles? Do they just come to you? Do you move people around at all?
Yeah, I think, we've got an incredible group that have been here for numerous years, a lot of them 3 years, which doesn't sound like a lot when you're in a different line of work, but at a farm is a lot. There's such high turnover at farms. So those folks, some of them came with a lot of skills and had an immediate place. Like Mika already had tons of greenhouse work when we hired her. And so she started in the greenhouse manager role right away. And other people have been trained kind of throughout the last couple of years based on where we see their skills and their interest. So it's a little bit of both. And I'd say we're very lucky in that we have very highly skilled applicants every year. I think even though we're only in our 6th season, because our farm is quite different than a lot of other small, medium organic farms, because of our social justice work that we do, as well as our LGBTQ identity. We get people from all over the country who apply, and it's quite competitive. So we've lucked out. It's been a journey from the our first few years where
Yeah.
that was not the case at all.
Yeah. Well, you have a really tight ship and your fields look great. And so people want to work there. They see and you have a lot of, you would do a lot of social justice too. And I know that's important for a lot of people too. And so I feel like that probably helps bringing in a good amount of applicants as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really true. Yeah.
So talk to us about that. You have a variety of food justice and then youth leadership programs and then social justice. Talk about those programs. What ages do you work with?
Yeah, so we have two primary areas that we focus our social justice work on. One is food access work. So right now, about half of all of our food produced on the farm goes to low-income people. And that's through partnerships with community organizations, as well as our sliding scale. A lot of those people are connected to us through LGBTQ centers and queer health centers and things like that in New York City, as well as like local food pantries that are quite close to our farm. And then, so that's one side of the social justice work that we do, is just like addressing kind of like in a Band-Aid form in some way, the food inequities that we see around us. We're not in the policy realm as much as just like, what can we do as farmers? And then the other side of our work is specifically working with LGBTQ community. So training farmers who want essentially a safe space to learn farming and don't feel like they can find that at other locations. So right now we're doing weekend trainings on tractor skills, and we're also running a program called Pollinate, which is a paid apprenticeship program that's for adults who are beginner farmers and know that this is the work they want to do, but want to gain a lot more skills in it, and not just farming skills, but also skills on cooperative development, financial literacy, the administration side of things, and also really importantly, kind of work culture and how do you create a thriving, healthy workspace, and which is something that's not often a focus in agriculture. So it's something we definitely highlight as part of our farm, is like the work environment that we're trying to create that is not always what you find in other farms that are very top down, very exploitative essentially of a lot of the workers.
So now one thing I noticed is like you are a relatively large farm, you have a large team, but you don't have like H2A workers. Has that been intentional? You just feel like you can build a community of people locally?
Yeah, I think we have looked into it in the past, but we haven't gone that direction, not for particularly any reason that I can think of, more that we have so many applicants just in our community, and trying to really build our cooperative is an important thing. So like people who are living here full time and can see a life for themselves. But that's just where we're oriented towards. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about the cooperative. How many people are in the cooperative and how does that operate?
So it's been between 2 to 3 since the beginning, and now we're transitioning to 5, kind of like this month. So that will be our biggest team so far. And the cooperative model that we've come up with is still very much based on your job description, your day-to-day position at the farm doesn't change widely when you become an owner. You're still very much going and looking at your kind of job description and your work contract as like that role that you hold as the number one. But we do have monthly owner meetings that are higher level decision making. So deciding on the budget for the year, deciding on large capital purchases. If there's, a disaster that happens, navigating that disaster. If there's, a very big conflict that happens between two staff, that would go to the owner team if it felt like it couldn't get resolved between just D and I as general managers. So there are these upper level decisions, and we have this matrix that we follow that outlines essentially what are owner decisions and what are manager level decisions, other staff, so that we can kind of like help guide that process. And then everyone in the business has equal share. So even though Dee and I have been there with Rocksteady from the jump, we don't have any more voting rights or equity rights. We're essentially have one vote just like everyone else. And then at the end of the year, the owner dividends, the payout, would be divided by hours worked.
Okay.
And that's in addition to the payroll. All owners are on payroll. So we're not a farm that is like a number of farms where you're taking owners' draws whenever you want, or like at the end of the year based on how well the farm did. We're actually just very much by the books in terms of all owners track their hours, get paid through payroll like any employee. And then if we do well at the end of the season, that profit, some of it stays in the business and then some of it gets split up between the owners.
Gotcha. Now, so like initial investments, I'm sure you put like money in originally to buy equipment and stuff. Are you gradually taking that capital investments at the beginning gradually out, or how does that work?
Great question. Yeah. So we actually didn't start with a lot of money invested in the business. Each owner put in $500. And we were able to secure a loan for the buyout of that previous farmer. So we bought a lot of his equipment and then additional equipment on top of that through our startup loan, which was $115,000. And that was through a cooperative loaning institute that's essentially funds specifically co-ops, primarily run by BIPOC and queer business owners. But their whole model is very different than a lot of other learning institutions. So we felt like we could, there was less risk essentially. So even though we weren't financially backed as individuals, because none of us had much personal savings or family money, we felt like we could do that jump because the learning institute that we're working with doesn't collateralize and doesn't like hold individuals liable. It's really the risk lied with the LLC, which was working with a very non-extractive learning institute. So it's in fund. So now it's called Seed Commons now is the official name of that fund.
Very cool. So you farmed both in California and New York. What would you say the main differences you've seen between the two as far as the land practices and farming community?
I mean, California is just massive. I think there's a lot more larger scale farms there in general and more kind of global trading going on, more lobbying connections to DC. There's just, it all feels a little bit more political. And I think that there's definitely that type of farming in New York State as well, but it tends to be not quite in the Hudson Valley area as much as in the western part of the state, where there's larger scale farms there. But California's unique, it really is like there's so much food comes out of California and it goes so many places. So just being in that environment is very, very different. And I felt like I learned a lot just about how food systems worked in general. I spent a good amount of time visiting other large scale farms, and, just trying to kind of understand them from the inside, to better understand just in general, like what is agriculture like in the United States? What is this? What part of it do I want to be a part of? Having grown up in kind of like a smaller scale farming community, average around 20 acres is like what my dad was farming. And that's so different from a lot of those farms in California. So wanting to understand that, and absorb it.
So in California, were you on those massive farms or were you on more of the mixed CSA farms?
No, I was on smaller scale. Yeah, I was definitely, and I did some urban ag stuff there too. I did have the opportunity, because I was interested in education work, to spend a number of weeks over the years at larger scale farms, like learning kind of in like I don't know, I was a student essentially. I got trained on these large tractors and got trained on like kind of water rights and stuff like that through a couple of different programs. That was really interesting. Yeah. And different, like just visiting, pure interest, a lot of different farms.
Yeah. California is crazy out there. And it's such a cool thing because, the season is crazy too, because it's just such a long, drawn out season.
Yeah. I missed the seasons. I mean, that's one of the reasons I left, is like, it was too much to farm so close to year round there. Yeah. I love the break. Yeah.
And in New York, especially where you are, you get all 4 seasons. So it's really nice to get that. So talk to us about your Pollinate apprenticeship program.
Yeah, we're so excited about this. It's something that we've been, just slowly marinating on for a number of years. But it feels really exciting to launch it this year with our pilot in August. But it's something also that we felt like, we weren't quite ready. We weren't in a stage where we knew enough about our own systems and that we could train anyone else, So it feels like we're in a good place. We have an amazing team who are all excited about the program. So we're starting small with 4 apprentices that will all be paid and housed. So we're paying for their housing. And
which I might add is not cheap where you are.
No, yeah, you can say that again. Yeah. Housing's a huge challenge for farmers in our area. But yeah, so we're accepting applicants mostly just in the Northeast. We are partnered specifically with a great training program in New York City called Farm School NYC.
Yep.
And so part of the desire is working with students and alumni from that New York City based urban ag program and giving those folks an opportunity to learn more large scale rural farming. And we're also going to be partnering with them on kind of the curriculum around the tail ends of the season. So although we're doing the hands-on component in season, we want to make sure that there's a really holistic, well-rounded curriculum that we're giving them that will include like Zoom and different things like that.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the things with a apprenticeship or internship program. It's always challenging, and I know there's always can be that rub between, am I here just to be cheap labor, or am I here to actually learn? And there's that I guess that traction or that friction I find. And so I applaud you. I think you said there earlier you waited to launch this because you didn't feel like you knew you had your systems in place first.
Yeah.
So that's really cool that how you're setting that up, that you've been really intentional about that to make sure they actually get a really good education. And the Zoom aspect with other farms, that kind of stuff is really cool too.
Yeah, and we think it's a unique program, and we have a lot of incredible educators on our staff, who have been doing education work and farming off and on. So we're set up really well to hold space for, beginner farmers, and also create a really different environment from a lot of the other training spaces that we know of, which are oftentimes larger institutions, universities, that might not feel welcoming to both BIPOC communities or LGBTQ communities. So the fact that we're making this specifically for that community, is unique, and we definitely want to uplift just kind of like how that this is one opportunity that we're trying to do, but we need more of these other places too, like training programs that are funded for, that people fundraise and donate to, that are really run by the communities that need those training programs, not necessarily just larger institutions and nonprofits.
So if you were to start your farm all over again, what kind of systems and processes would you go back and put in place at the beginning?
Yeah, it's been a ride. I think, I don't regret trying flowers, but I think if we were to do it again, it would have been nice not to have so many enterprises at once in the beginning. And I think also I wish we had the funding from the jump to have a tractor that was new. Like now, 2 years ago, we were able to purchase a brand new Kubota, and the amount of time and headache and stress that has relieved us versus working with older tractors that, were cheaper off the jump, but caused us so much stress when they broke down mid-season and we had to get them repaired, and then we lost like 2 successions, you know what I mean? Like,
yes, yeah,
that I feel like I would have liked to have had a more reliable tractor from the very beginning.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. Having one tractor that will work and whenever you need it to is so key. And the last 2 days I've jumped tractors 6 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were 2 of my old tractors, and I was like, okay, I need to just, figure out what's wrong and replace, either it's the alternator or maybe it's just the battery that needs to go. But being able to have the main tractor, I'm always getting on. It's a brand new, only 100 hours on it now, is so nice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that is one key thing. I think just like also, we started out like not being able to pay our farmers very much, and we still struggle with that. I think
Yes.
our average, most of our farmers make $15 an hour, and general managers D and I make $17 an hour. So it's not a huge range there, but like when we first started out, we were like cusping like $11 an hour, and I feel like, and that's like the minimum wage was lower then, but it also was just all we could afford. But that really does impact the farm when you go to the lowest, rate that you feel like you can survive at. That also is like, okay, then your farmers are really stressed because they're not making enough money to live off of this work, and they're not going to come back the next year. So you're putting all this energy into training people who are struggling just being at your farm. So I feel like the other thing I would have done differently is just somehow figured out a budget that would have paid off the bat like $15 an hour at least, instead of like just struggling so much. And I think we did the best that we could. Like, honestly, I know that a lot of farmers don't take any paychecks their first couple of years for various reasons. But that wasn't an option for us because this was our primary income. So we did the best that we could.
but you wish you'd been able to change it. And I, that is one of the things that I feel like, vegetable farmers work so hard. I mean, the calorie requirements for vegetable farmers, one of the top ones out there.
Mhm.
And typically they're not paid in compensation of how hard they work. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's
um,
something, and we're trying to get to $20 an hour. So,
yeah.
which is hard when the price of food isn't going up like that,
Yes, especially this year, the inflation is happening and you're seeing, price of everything else go up, but you
Yeah.
haven't been able to bring the price of that up. All right, with that, let's stop here and take a quick break. In a minute, we'll be back and finish the rest of this interview. Hey, thriving farmers, where are you on your thriving farmer journey? So if you go to our website, growingfarmers.com, you can click on the assessment button, and that will take you to a form, ask you a few different questions, and that will help you figure out where you are on the 5-stage thriving farmer journey. And what that does then is kicks you a customized PDF that gives you resources to know exactly what to focus on next in your business to go to the next level. So go to growingfarmers.com and click on the assessment. And we are back and talking about from Rock Steady Farm. So talk to us a little bit about your marketing. You're more of a CSA farm, correct?
We've done a lot of wholesale in the past as well. And right now we're primarily CSA. But I'd say at one point we were majority wholesale as we were building our CSA. So I have a little bit of experience in both those worlds.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and which do you prefer?
Definitely CSA. Yeah.
Okay.
Hands down. Mm-hmm.
And that's because the interaction with the customers or?
For me, it's a guaranteed outlet that just stress wise is
Yeah.
massive. I think that's huge. And then connection to our members, like ability to build community in a more concrete way. It's more tangible. We can have work days, we can send newsletters, there's like interaction back and forth. And also just the price of food that we can sell. So our price point is, double what we could get on the wholesale market.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, are you certified organic or not?
We're non-certified, but we practice organic.
Yeah, and that obviously affects the wholesale prices drastically.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that I agree with you on the CSA part of that. Okay, so how you find your CSA members? What's your marketing consist of?
So we started off doing a lot of outreach locally. We did door-to-door mailers. We put flyers up everywhere. We went to every community event we could possibly think of, like just we hosted like meet the farmer events. We really were going all out because we wanted to build the local pickup in a real big way. We're like, okay, we've got 65 members our first year, so how can we get that to 200? So we're just like doing everything. But we ended up realizing that there's kind of like a cap at 100 in our area in terms of who's going to be signing up annually. Just there's not the density of people that is needed for a larger scale. And so we did branch out to New York City. And I think we were really lucky in that both Dee and I lived in New York City, D for majority of their life. And we had a lot of community in New York City. So just like friends, people we used to work with who wanted to join, but also we had connections to community centers and different health centers that we had been going to, and were part of the LGBTQ community that we were in New York. So we were like, okay, well, we want to feed people in our community, so we'll go to these community centers. And we started this outreach that was very targeted to those community centers. So the first couple of years, it meant us talking to a lot of staff members. We would do presentations with like slideshows at like staff meetings, which with some of these stuff, there's like 200 staff, so it's pretty substantial numbers of people. And then they would do outreach to their social media, their newsletters, which we're lucky, like the LGBTQ Center in New York has a huge newsletter. I think there's about 80,000 people.
Oh, wow.
And they were doing outreach for us, which was new for them. They're like, when have they ever done outreach for a farm? So this is like very different. There was a lot of educating that was going on in terms of us kind of like hand feeding them like the text and images and working with graphic designer and stuff. So and I'd say that helped kind of kickstart those sites, and then continually working on kind of like marketing over the years and different kind of outreach through those partners has been the most effective, because our newsletter is only 3,000 people. So which might sound like a lot, but I think a lot of those people are not CSA member people. They're people who just are interested in us or maybe friends. And I think being able to kind of like tap into other larger groups, listservs, and have that support really help build to the 500. And I think additionally, there's a lot of interest in just the last year through like the world of COVID, where people wanted to have their local food sources secured. And I think CSA memberships rose a lot in the last 2 seasons. And we saw that as well. We had a 200 person wait list last year. So it was quite significant, that shift in demand.
Now, with the CSA, are you providing what size of shares do you do? And kind of like, what's your philosophy for how you pack that?
So we do half shares and full shares. And we offer like around 5 vegetables for the half shares and around 8 to 10 for the full shares. We try to do a diversity of crops like a lot of CSAs. I think we also buy in sometimes. There's certain crops that we don't grow very well and are not financially viable for us to grow. When we do the analysis at the end of the year of like dollars per square foot, potatoes is like nothing, and there's certain crops that are just not, like sweet corn, potatoes, where we can get those locally and organically, luckily, and buy those in. So that's helped us a lot in terms of being able to feed a large CSA, but not have to grow everything for the CSA.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, then, what would you say your favorite crop to grow is?
Well, I think, I have a lot. I mean, our business-wise, I think our favorite crops are kale and tomatoes.
Okay.
We grow the most of those 2 items. That's our wholesale item. So we're doing 600 pounds of kale every other week to a large account, and we're doing a lot of tomatoes. We do like about, just in tomatoes wholesale, like 25 grand, which isn't nothing. And but I think my favorite to grow, I do love peppers in general. I love peppers, and something about peppers. We grow way too many peppers than we need to grow, but I love the different varieties and flavors, and actually harvesting them is very satisfying. And they're not that heavy, so you're pulling them out of the field, and it's actually not that heavy.
It's not a carrot root weight. So what varieties do you like of the peppers right now? What are your top varieties?
I like padron peppers. And I like the kind of Italian friars like Jimmy Nardello.
Yes.
We grow King of the North, which is a variety from the Hudson Seed Company,
Okay.
Hudson
Yeah.
Valley Seed Company. And that's a great, just classic red bell pepper that's specifically does well in the Northeast. So those are some of my top.
Very nice. What's your favorite way to cook the padron pepper?
I like just the kind of on the skillet situation.
Yeah. So just blister it, throw some salt on it. Awesome.
Yeah.
What would you say to new farmers that are thinking of getting it into the business? What kind of advice would you give them?
I think get as much skill under you as possible before starting your own operation. I think that's something, and also, think about cooperative models. I'd say starting a business is, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Like it was just, and we were hit with a lot of challenges. We got a tornado hit us, like our second season. We got, we had a lot going on. But any startup farm is really hard. So I'd say thinking about a cooperative model, to me is really what can lead to more sustainable model for farms in terms of just resilience and making it. If you do burn out as a farmer and or you get sick or you get hurt, there are other people there to continue on what you've started. So that to me is something I think about a lot in terms of my day-to-day. Like, okay, who am I cross-training? Are there redundancies all the time? If something happened to like one of our farmers, would other people be able to jump in? And that's the same for me as an owner. I want to make sure that everything I do, other people can do, so that if I need to take a break or if my family member passes away, I can do that and it's not gonna crumble. And I think that's really key to just farmer mental health, key to making this like a sustainable livelihood. Is just trying to prevent burnout, is trying to kind of not feed into this mentality that I think a lot of farms just normalize, which is, oh, it's normal to work 80 hours a week. It's normal not to get paid that much. It's normal to like lose your mind every June. Like, no, it shouldn't be normal. That shouldn't be this like just standard of, acceptance that we're in right now. And I think that that's something that I feel really strongly about is like, okay, what is a farm model that can also really center mental health and make this a different type of work culture than what we've seen the last 100 years, where, really farming has been based on exploitation, slavery, oftentimes like very kind of top down mentalities, and it's not based on the well-being of farmers and like their longevity in this work and their health, mental and physical. So I think there's just a large emphasis that I want to project onto any farmers out there, and new farmers especially, is just don't deprioritize your own health. Because if you deprioritize human health, you're going to deprioritize the soil health. You're going to deprioritize your business. It's not, it all has to focus on just like the well-being of the people as much as anything else.
Yeah, because if the people can't take care of themselves, then they're going to cut corners on a lot of other things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What would you say your favorite tool on the farm is?
I think the Perfecta, I don't know. I think it's a great implement. I think it's a really great one in terms of just kind of helping break down, cover crops when they're almost there. And then also the fact that you can use it as a final bed prep I think it's a great implement. Yeah.
Well, it's not as aggressive as a rototiller, so it helps with soil health a lot more than that, I feel, but it still does a fair good job of making that final seed bed and, as you said, breaking things down.
And for us, we have rocky soil. So
Yes.
It's like the rototiller is not ideal because we just have to replace those parts so often.
Yeah, the tines and the gearing and stuff. What size of Perfecta do you have?
We're about to transition to 10 foot. Right now we have a 6 foot so that we could do kind of like individual bed turnover.
Okay.
But we're trying to do 10 foot. I think now that we're scaled out of flowers, when we had our flower operation, we needed to keep things really tight in terms of the implements we got. Even our disc is small so that we could kind of turn just like one bed in that section over really quick.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So now you're at the scale where you're doing 2 beds at once, probably. At least.
Or 5,
Yeah.
Or 10. I think generally speaking, we're doing more like 10 blocks. Yeah. Which are what our whole crop plan is.
Cool. Well, will that 6 foot be for sale, or are you going to keep that around?
Oh, likely for sale. Yeah, okay. We're going to be selling a bunch of stuff this fall. So look out for our emails.
All right. Well, I'm going to sign up because I may be in the market for a 6 foot.
Oh, great.
Yes. Yeah. It's always, it's something that I've been looking for a bit now. All right. Well, cool. Well, any final thoughts before we go? This has been a fun conversation.
Yeah, I guess one last one. I think also for the CSA farmers out there, do look into the sliding scale model. I do recommend it as a way to reach lower income people, as well as, feeding that diversity of people that normally a CSA draws in the higher income level who can put that down payment. But on our website, we have a webinar that we did around our sliding scale that can be really helpful. But I do think it's a really great way for farmers who are passionate about kind of like the food access piece to trial. And I think there are ways that farmers are doing this all over the country, all over the world. I'm networked with some other farmers in different spots, and the sliding scale model is working well. And I think it's just something that I wish I saw more of. So just encouraging that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is great. And I think that is something that I think we as farmers, as pushing the small farm movement forward, do need to think about is how do we bring the people that don't have the resources to get fresh food. It was something I think it was maybe another podcast I mentioned it on, but you look at the people that are in low-income neighborhoods, and so often they don't feel good because they're not eating good food. And when you don't feel good, you don't have the initiative to go out and do a lot of things sometimes. So you're just trying to literally subside instead of, having endless health. And when you're not well, then you're also going to the doctor more frequently, and you have to take off time from work and all of that. So, getting good, solid nutrition to these lower income neighborhoods is just so key.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate you coming on and sharing about your farm and the awesome things you're doing there.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Hey, thriving farmers, have you checked us out on YouTube lately? We have a bunch of new content there, including a few rants by me. I want to tell you, you don't want to miss them. I actually go rant about, some of the problems I see in our space and some of the challenges I see farmers facing. So go check that out. We've got instructional videos over there as well. Talk about setting up our new farm here in Ohio and all the steps we're going to do that, as well as just tutorials and tips on best practices for all sorts of things on the farm. So go ahead, check over at Growing Farmers on YouTube and see the new content we put together for you. So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.